Hello, everyone. Megan here from Romance by the Book with the lovely Marielle.
Hello.
And this is week 2 for April's book of the month, The Wolf and the Wildflower by Stacy Reid. And things are getting exciting here. We ended up with them kind of bonding over his cooking over the campfire. And
The
he's like,
last thing that happened was that he was like, "You are free to sniff me,"
yes,
and
please
she was
sniff me.
and
And
she was
also
like,
she
"This
he
seems like
tells
a
her
bad
to call
idea,
him
but here I
James,
go."
which is a big step too, I felt like. Um And he says, "I've never smelled anything like you, Wildflower," which is one of the first times he calls her that, and that was like so yeah, that's, like, right where we left you guys. So, so James asks her, "What do I smell like?" And she is clearly turned on, and they have some, like, banter back and forth.
She's
Um
like, "I've never smelled anything," in her head,
Yeah,
but out her mouth is just kind of like, "You smell like meat."
right? Right, because 'cause he's been cooking, yeah. So, they talk about, like, making a list of things that he's missed, like, while he was gone. And that's hard for him because he kind of like abandoned all hope years ago. It was the only way that he could survive. And it's dangerous. It feels dangerous to him now to think in those terms again, basically. Um, but he does miss touch and he craves touch, even though he doesn't like being touched by other people. Like, so that's sort of like a bridge he hasn't really been able to cross yet. Um, and he hasn't, and she asks him if he's willingly touched anybody since his return, and he says no. And, but he says, "But," and then she's like, I guess he gets a look on his face, and she's like, "What are you thinking now, James?" And he says that, "I want my wildflower to touch me, and I wish to touch her as well." And she's like, "Oh, no." So, she touches his face with one finger, and after a couple of false starts, he's like, "Okay, more." And so she's kinda running her hands all over his shoulders and his face, and, um, it's really I mean, it's sexy, but it's also really sweet. It's like the first time he's willingly, like, wanted somebody to touch him since he's been back.
Yeah, it's also, it's interesting because he's, like, very flinchy still,
Mhm.
but then he allows himself to, like, sit with that discomfort long enough for her
To let
to
yeah,
to
start
yeah, to
sinking
let her
into it.
touch him.
And he says
And she we do get the sense too, not the sense, she says it, like, in
yeah,
her head, that she does not allow herself to touch people either because she is living with a man, and if anyone got close to her, they might notice that
right,
she,
and that she's avoided that her entire life.
even her dad, even
Yeah,
so, like, the only person who really, I guess, touches her must be her mom because she's the only
yeah.
one who knows.
And he says something to her like, "I want your touch all the time whenever I want it." And she says, "Spoken like a duke."
He's so
And they're
worried
like,
he's
"What?"
not gonna come off, like, he's not gonna look ducal enough or seem ducal enough,
Right.
and meanwhile, he is very like, he's
He is
got
the
that
duke.
entitlement,
Yeah.
pride,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
bossiness all the way down.
It's very funny. And now he wants to touch her, and she agrees. So he, like, unties her neck cloth and is basically all but, like, feeling her up, and they're bantering, like, through this entire thing. And his, a noise, like, in the forest kind of, like, brings, hit or and he's, like, he's nosing around the whole time. Like, he's not just touching her, he's sniffing her. And he's like and he basically noses himself down south, and she is scandalized. And he says, "I wanna lick you all over." And she says something like, "Some dangerous truth should not be said aloud." And, because 'cause she's been trying to get him to talk to her, this entire time, but she's like, "Maybe don't say that though."
Yeah, he's he's like, "I had a feeling that maybe if I opened my mouth, it would not be what you
Yeah.
wanted."
And then
But the
she
thing
tries
is, it's not that it's not what she wants to hear, because she is
yeah,
definitely it's maybe too much what she wants to hear.
yeah. And so she tries to kind of play it off, and she's like, some ladies on the marriage mart will definitely appreciate your devilish charm, like, you won't have a problem in that area, basically.
Yeah,
And, but the more she talks about anybody besides herself, the he, like, starts to feel himself going cold again, like, the touching time is over, basically, and he
yeah.
sends her back to the house after thanking her for, like, letting him do that, basically.
And she does, it's like, I don't know, I feel like she hurts herself when she does it, right? Like, she says it, it's almost like she's trying to remind herself that, like, this is not a thing that can
This is
happen.
not a thing that can happen. Yeah. So, the next few days, dancing lessons are happening and they are not going well for James. And at one
I
point, the
mean, I don't know,
teacher,
for James, the dance instructor is really the one who's having the most problem.
that's true, but, when the teacher touches him unexpectedly, James basically, like, throws hands and, like, has the guy, or hands around the guy's throat.
The
And
lady who was there, his assistant playing the
like,
violin,
"Oh,
runs
he's
off
trying to
like he's trying to
kill
murder him. Yeah. So,
him."
much more
And
drama than dance
yeah, so
lessons
much
should
drama. And
entail.
so he basically orders everyone out, and he goes outside after taking off his, like, shirt and shoes. So it's like a whole scandal. And it's raining, and so everybody's like, "What's he doing?" And, he's sort of missing being alone in nature. Like, he's thinking about that because his house is full of people that his I mean, they're family, but it's, like, people his mom's invited, and he's
But
like,
it's
he doesn't want them there.
15 people, like, his
Yeah.
family, and I think I mentioned that in the recap last week. Because from the beginning, it's kind of like, "Yeah, my 15 family members that are in my house," and I'm like,
What?
when I have, like, 3 people visiting my house after a few days, I'm like, "Oh, wow,
Good
there's
night.
people here. You are still here. Amazing." And I love them, but also, like,
Yeah, but also totally. And so, of course, just as he's thinking how much he likes being alone, she shows up and he's happy about it. So they run together for a while, and Jules tells him that it's a normal reaction for someone in his situation, what he did. And the teacher did not respect his boundaries, and like
yep,
that's not on him. Like he made it very clear, and they were the ones that transgressed, not him. And I think that makes him feel a lot better because, of course, he's
yeah,
starting to feel beastly the way everybody thinks of him after this happens. And she's like, no, like he's the one that did the wrong thing, not you.
yeah. And you warned him, like, you did say from the beginning, "These are the rules," and
Yeah.
that guy just did not follow the rules.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting too that when Jules comes out in the rain, she is a little bit, like, luxuriating and being out in nature too. Like,
Hmm.
she, like, tips her head back and lets the water, like, hit her face, and he's kind
Hmm.
of like, "Isn't that gonna mess up your makeup?" But
Right.
she, like, she's enjoying that time too.
Yeah.
So it's not, I feel like it's those little things that kind of show us that they are really well suited and that
Right.
they can meet in the middle of things too. Like,
Yeah.
Jules is there to, like, make sure that he can act the part of a duke. She
Right.
also is not, like, at all horrified that he enjoys walking in the rain. Like, it's fine.
Right. Bare chested or no.
Maybe
And
bare
so
chested is even better.
yeah, even better. So he returns home earlier than normal that night and he catches his sister playing this like melancholy tune on the piano. And he kind of watches her for a while. And then as he goes to leave, she like
Notices, yeah.
notices him and asks him to stay. And so they have a drink together and talk a little bit. And he explains how he had to stop thinking of her and stop hoping because it was killing him. Like it was the only way that he could survive. And it's not easy for him to just turn that back on.
Right, and his sister had seemed sad, like, from the time he came back to him.
Yeah.
But also, when she realizes that he remembers her,
Right.
she is even more sad about it because, it's like, he does have memories of her where, it's clear that they were, like, each other's kind of favorite people.
Right.
And so, we don't get her point of view, but you can tell that, like, of course, this is
Right.
heartbreaking for her that she's so excited that he came back, and then he's acting like he doesn't know her.
Yeah.
Um, but he's able to, like, express himself in a way that I
Yeah.
think makes it easier for her to understand, and
I
he
agree.
invites her
And
to, like, she's like, "Oh, you like to be outside?" And he's like, "Maybe we can go look at the stars together." And
right.
so it's like they find a place to start, I guess,
It's very
which
sweet.
is
And they do talk a little bit about like her friends and like this suitor that she had been corresponding with, but no letters have come since he's returned and she's worried that like people are freaked out or whatever.
yeah.
Um
Interesting because the fact that he's a duke feels and it's not stated here at all, but you can infer that, like, maybe that's part of the reason why his mom is so, like, uh, freaked out by the situation and, like,
Yeah,
insistent that he has to, like, play the part because, we still have that one thing that's hanging over them is that the queen, if she finds that their family isn't suited to have this title, that she could take it away.
right,
So it feels like people, and we've had this impression even from before from like the gossip columns and all that
right.
stuff, that people are kind of holding their breath to see like what he's
What's
going
gonna
to do
happen?
and what's going to happen.
Yeah,
But
and not getting
he,
too close in the meantime, so as
yeah, I
to
was
not
going to say, I
get
don't think he had realized that it was affecting
yeah.
his family that way.
So we're back to Jules and she can't sleep again. She's been thinking about things that James said to her about licking her all over and how much she maybe wants to take him up on that. And then she hears footsteps and wonders if it's him returning. And she kind of walks over to the door and she's kind of like listening. And he says, I can smell you through the door, Wildflower. Open the door. Something's going on with your scent. It's richer, he says to her. And she's like, yeah, because I'm hot for you, dumbass. Yeah, but she's like really like, oh no, I'm definitely not should I open the door? Maybe I should not open the door. But she does, and
But
she steps
she,
out.
yeah, it's like the
And
more excited she gets, the more he's like,
yeah.
stop it.
Well, and it's also the first time that he's seeing her without the makeup and the mustache and everything that makes her, look more masculine. And she's lovely, and he tells her so, and, they talk about Felicity, his sister, and the interaction that they just had, um, and she encourages him to continue, like, trying to bond with his sister, and he says he's been thinking about the list that she wanted him to make about the things that he's missed, or things that he wants to
That he
do,
wants to do, yeah.
and, he says he wants to kiss a woman, and she's like, "I'm sure one will agree." And he's like, "You?" And he's like and she says, "Of course not." And he's like, "I want it to be you though." Basically. Um,
The thing that's kind of sweet about this too, well, not sweet, but like makes this a bit of a unique situation, right? Is that
yeah,
he is like, I really like don't want any other people near me.
I don't
And
want
it's
anybody else
not
to
even
kiss me.
like it's just he's not comfortable at when less it's her.
Well, and
And
he says that to her too, because I think he can kind of tell that she's hesitant, not just because of their situation, but like because it feels like he wants to kiss her because she's there, kind of a thing. And he's like, no, like it's because it's you. It's not just because it's convenient. Um, and
it was
so
a good distinction to make.
yeah,
I
it
mean,
was
that's
for sure.
important information.
And so he does kiss her, and it is like all consuming. He's like smelling her, and um, she is into it, but, like, when he starts sniffing her, she's like it kinda, like, pops her brain on again, and she's like, "Oh my god, no, like, this cannot happen. This can never happen again." Like,
She is like, mistake, mistake,
mistake,
mistake.
mistake, mistake, and he's like and she's like, "We have to show restraint," or something like that, and he's like, "What does restraint do for us?" Basically, and she says something like, "It protects us from consequences that might be too hard to bear." And, and he's like, I mean, that vibes with him. He's like, "Okay, I get what you're saying." And but he does say, "Given the primal urges and temptation beating at me, it's best if I do not smell you behind the door again, Wildflower." She's like, "Okay."
Okay.
And
It's basically like, probably you need to get out of here. And
yeah,
she agrees, question mark.
yeah.
But
But yeah, so they both go to bed. James the
but she
next
does go to bed right there.
yeah,
Like she just like plops on the bed on the other
yeah,
side of the
and
door.
passes
She
out
just
fine, even though she had been struggling to sleep before that.
funny.
Yeah. So a few days later, he's been reading a ton of books since his return, but nothing has been enough to distract him from that kiss that's been
Yeah.
like 3 days
And he
before.
had been reading like from when we met him. He
Yeah.
clearly was a reader, and he was reading a lot of things like kind of bringing himself up to date with
Right.
like information that
Catching
he
up
should
with the
know.
world. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so he heads outside. and Jules shows up again. She saw him leave. She did move rooms like she said she would, but instead of across the hall, she's in the next bedroom over her, or like 2 bedrooms over
So,
with
like,
an
if he's in
adjoining
the
door.
Dukes, they're, like, adjoining rooms now, and
Yeah.
I'm like, "What woman?"
And she's like thinking she's clever because she like had a bunch of flowers and other stuff like in the middle, like hoping that that would block him from smelling her, which I guess it did a little bit, but like
It
because he
didn't.
thought he was smelling residual,
He
not like
thought he was,
fresh.
like, haunted by her smell. Like, when we meet him, he's like, "I can't even. I'm
Yeah,
haunted by the smell of my wildflower." Well,
yeah,
yeah, that's because she's still hanging. In fact, she is now adjacent to you.
yeah, exactly. So they walk out to the tree house and they're like holding hands, which is so sweet. And she almost falls climbing up the rope ladder and scrapes her hand, which like upsets him. Um, and he says he can hear her heartbeat, which she's like, "What?" Like, she
He's
doesn't
also
really
like,
believe
"You're
that.
so you are frail," and it's like he forgot that she was kind of breakable,
Yeah.
and, so which is I mean, it's sweet.
Yeah,
He
and
is
he
clearly cares
yeah,
about her in a way that's not just
and she's like, "What do you mean you can hear my heartbeat?" And he's like, "Well, I lived in a cave with wolves for years, and so, like, I learned to, like, do what they do, basically." And, and she's like, "Wait, what?" Like, she has so many questions, of course, and he says, "Who's asking? The doctor of the mind or my wildflower?" And she's like, "I mean, that's not fair because 'cause I'm both, and, like, all of parts of me want to know that, you know?" And so he tells her the story. He saved this wolf pup from a mountain ledge and barely makes it out, and then he, like, passes out, and when he wakes up, he's in a cave with the pack, and they sort of adopted him. They clearly knew that he saved their pup, and, he lived with them and hunted with them for years. And she's just, like, enthralled with this story, and then he asks her about why she, like, studied psychology. She's always wanted to help people, and of course, she, idolized her dad, and that's his business. Um, and and he's like, "So that's why you're here to help me?" And she's like, "That's why I'm here in general, but that's not why I'm here in this treehouse right now." Like, that's not those 2 things are not the same, basically.
yeah.
But I wanna be with you. That's why I'm here in this treehouse right now. And so
And
the
we do like, from the beginning of the book, she was intrigued by him and also, like, admiring of the fact that he survived and the way that like, she didn't know
yeah,
what he went through, but she was like, "Clearly, this is an extraordinary person if
right.
they survived this."
And are
So,
not, like,
it's
completely feral. Yeah,
yeah, and, like, once she met him, I don't think that that ever changed. If anything,
yeah,
it became more of a thing.
sure.
So, I don't know that he fully understands, but as a reader, I'm like, I've from the very from she the time she heard about him, I she was already like, "Oh, what a cool
Right, for
guy."
sure. Well, and it's interesting because she basically tells him, she's like, "The more you share with me and your family, and the more you allow touch, the more normal you're gonna start to feel. Like, these are things that you had to completely cut out of your life cold turkey, and the more you start to let them in, the more it's gonna feel like it's all okay."
Yeah.
Um, and she begins to feel like she needs to leave, like, right now, because otherwise she's gonna do something she should maybe not do, or what she already said she shouldn't do.
Yeah.
But of course, he's, like, right behind her, and he's like, "Your scent changed." Like, he's like, "I get it now, like, you want what I want, but you're scared of it." And so she turns around and kisses him, and so they make out. He's got his hand down her pants, which of course she likes, but then afterward, like, freaks the F out and just, like, trip falls down the rope ladder, like, trying to leave. But when she gets to the bottom, she kinda sits down and she, like, can't actually make herself leave.
Yeah.
Um, and so then he, like, drags her back up into the treehouse basically and takes her over to the cot, and he goes down, which is very hot, and afterward, he's like, "I can still smell that you're afraid." So he's like, "We'll wait until
You're
all I
not
can
afraid.
smell is desire." Yeah, and it's hot for
I
sure,
have to
and
say
she's
this man
super
has the
into it.
most extraordinary nose I've ever
Yeah.
heard of in my life.
Uh-huh. For sure. So the next couple days, all the ladies have shown up for this house party that his mom has decided to throw.
Ugh, it's the worst.
Yeah. And Jules and her dad are just sort of observing from the gazebo, like away from the fray.
Yeah, and I
And
mean, when these ladies come, it's like a bunch of people,
right.
gaggle of
Ladies and
men.
their families and or
Um,
guardians or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, and it's a smallish group. Because his mom kind of wants him to like have have met the people, pick the
Right. Like a
people.
trial run
So
before
like
the
it's kind
big
of a
ball.
trial run, but also it seems like she wants him to like meet, like she has invited like the people that she feels are like
Eligible
good
ladies.
prospects for him. And
Yeah.
she seems to think like you need to just pick one of these ladies while they're here in the house, and that way you don't have to really do like the marriage mart situation. Like you can just
Right.
pre-order your bride. And
Right.
she and so it's like there's all these ladies, but clearly there's one who is like
The
the
queen
top.
bee.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Lady
um
Amelia.
yeah, and it's clear,
Um,
like even from afar with
right.
Jules, and it's like clear that she's the one who.
Yeah, Jules is definitely noticing that. And she's talking to her dad about courtship. Jules says she might just live as a bachelor. And her dad's like, oh, I thought that too until I met your mom. And like something about the way he says that just kind of makes her angry because she, of course, knows what happened. And the reason she's living as a man is because, of what her mom decided to do, which is because of what her dad was doing. And so she says, if mama was so precious to you, why was it so important for you to have a male child? And he's like totally
What are you
affronted by
talking about?
this. Yeah, like what do you like how do you even know about that? Like what are you talking about? And she's like, what if I had been a girl? Like you would have made her try again regardless of the risk to her. Odd way to show your love, basically. And he is furious about
I
this.
mean, he's like, you do not talk about stuff you don't know about. I'm
Yeah.
getting out of here. Also, shut up.
Oh,
Like
he is
he can't
big
even
mad.
like
How dare
organize his
you?
thoughts.
Like
He's
my
so
choices
upset.
are none of your business,
Yeah,
etc. We will not discuss this again, basically.
yeah,
Um, and so she's, put off by that. And of course, she's also jealous because she can see this whole thing with Lady Amelia's
yeah.
happening, maybe.
Well, and the dad had said something to her like, you what was it that he said? I like almost like he saw like longing on her face, but
Mm,
he was like, "So you think you might want to get married soon?" Like so
right.
how the conversation starts is kind of a roundabout um of him noticing that Jules
Thinking she's
is.
noticing the ladies and potentially, yeah, thinking about courtship or whatever.
Yeah.
And
And
it's clear,
apparently his uncle has somebody in
yeah.
mind
And it's
for
clear
Jules.
through this that, like, the Duchess prefers Lady Amelia too. Like, she's clearly pushing her as, like, the front runner. Um, and and she's beautiful, but James is bored. Like, he does not wanna be doing this. And I wrote on the in my notes, side note, she's 19, Lady Amelia is, and he's 28, but people keep reminding Jules that she's not that close in age to him, and she's 23. And I was like, that really bothered me for some reason.
Yeah. Also,
Um,
like clearly she's kind of a childish because like she approaches him, and it very much seems like a girl who's like aware of her prettiness and whatever. And so she also does this
trip and
like
fall
you would
thing.
be it would be like someone fake dropping their handkerchief, except she like
Yes.
drops her whole self,
Her whole
and
self, and it's like,
he
"Oh,
does
no,
not
help me
help
out."
her. He's just
He's
like.
like, "Why are you still sitting there?" Basically, like, it's hilarious.
But it's
Um,
clear that it's just that he's like, I know you didn't fall,
right.
so just.
Like, we're not I don't do this. Whatever this is, I'm not doing it. Yeah. So, he finally is like, "Okay, I'm done." Like, and he starts walking toward the woods, and Jules follows him, and he can tell that she's angry about something, and so she tells him about her father not being aware of her secret, which he is shocked by because he thought that her dad was in on it and, like, helping her, further her career by still, pretending she's a man, but he has no idea.
Yeah.
Um, and so he
And
heads
also,
toward
like, how? It's like, how did that even happen?
yeah.
So,
And so he like the more she talks, the more he's so into her. And he's like, there's too many people around here. So he like heads back toward the house and gets them into the library. and he kisses her, and she's like, "We should stop," and he says, "I can shoulder any consequences, Wildflower," and she says, "I cannot." And, as they're talking about that, somebody knocks on the door of the library, and, James is shocked to open the door and find his BFF from his Eton days, the Marquis
Yep.
of Linfield, who is, of course, thrilled to see him.
Yeah. And it's like Jules has gone to the window to like compose herself,
Right,
because it's like
because they have been making
clearly
out.
she's been, yeah. So she's
Yeah,
just like,
yeah.
and
And so Linfield says he has just gotten home from travels and found out that he was there and came right away. And so he introduces Jules and they have a brief drink before she like excuses herself. And so
mhm.
Linfield says to James, "Oh, you guys seem close." And says, "Sotheby is one of my important persons." That's how he describes it, which I thought was very cute.
Yeah, that was sweet.
Um, and so Jules observes the goings on for the next few days, and of course, she's still feeling jealous. And she's also jealous that she can't be strolling the grounds, openly showing affection for him the way these other women are able to.
There's
Excuse me.
a lot of complicated feelings, it
Yeah.
seems like, because she um so when I first picked up this book, I thought that it was going to be kind of like a non-binary situation or something that, like maybe,
Right.
but as you're reading this, it's not that. It's kind of like a Catherine Hepburn situation where she's like, I am like she's a woman. She doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily want to be a man, or
Right.
doesn't necessarily feel like she's a man,
Right.
but she has lived her whole life with like all the freedoms afforded to
Yeah.
men of her society,
Right.
and she cannot like figure
Imagine
how
giving
she
that
would
up.
live a life that would be satisfying if she was put in a role of
And
women
beholden
like it.
to her husband or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, but she's still watching these ladies, and it's kind of like, good gracious, like, would it not be nice if I could
Yeah.
just be who I am instead of
Yeah.
having to sit back here?
Yeah. And so at one point, she and her father chat with the Duchess about James's progress. And then her father asks her if she wants to work with him in London once they leave the estate. And of course, she'd be getting practical experience with patients, and that excites her. And so
Yeah,
she's,
she had considered going back to school, and so the dad was kind
yeah,
of like, "Well, I was hoping that you would, like,
stay and
hang
work
around
with
for a
me.
while."
Yeah.
Um, so
And of course, that's very tempting to her because all she wants is to like be her dad's top guy, basically.
yeah.
Um, and so back at the house, she sees James's study door ajar and she goes into him and she kisses the shit out of him, basically, just like out of the blue, and then walks out and leaves the room again. And I was like, because she was so happy about like what her dad had just offered her and everything, and he was there and nobody else was around, and she was like, okay,
Well, and, like, clearly he's the one person that she would wanna they've been trading their truths,
right.
and so he is the one person that she would understand and that she would wanna tell. It's really kinda sweet
Yeah,
the
it's
way
really
that
sweet.
they are getting close to each other.
Um, and so in her room, she gets the foolhardy idea that she's going to attend the ball at the end of the week as a woman. Even the potential consequences of this do not dissuade her. So she buys a dress in town and she shows up at the ball, and there's about 200 people. So at first I was like, it's like a house party dance. Like, how is nobody going to notice you? But then they explained that like there was about 200 people there. It's like local people from the town where their estate is or whatever,
Yeah.
plus the people that are actually staying at the house. So I was like, okay, that's like a little a little
And
bit better.
also, when your family is already 15 people,
Right, right.
then I bet, like, although those other people
Yeah.
who showed up, they probably already had, like, 50 to 75 people in the house, and
Yeah,
then the
plus another like
neighboring
200 people from
gentry
town
has
or whatever.
come. Yeah.
So she assumes that she'll be able to blend in, which she mostly does, except for that. Then she finds James on the balcony and he smells her, and like he smells her coming basically. She came to dance with him, and so they waltz. she is worried this was a huge mistake, but she can't really be sorry because this is exactly what she wanted. That's why she did it.
Yeah.
Um,
And he hasn't danced with anybody else.
mm-mm,
He hasn't like, he does not want people touching him still, so it's his mom, I think,
yeah,
had wanted him to, and
like
he
Dance with
was like, "No,
Amelia.
thanks.
Yeah.
You
And so
don't
of
want me
course,
doing that, actually."
yeah.
And so then
And so much is unsaid between them. They're just dancing, but like things are happening even though they're not talking. And when it's over, he like walks her over to the, refreshment table, whatever, and leaves the room. And she follows him after.
Mhm.
And that's the end of chapter 11. So it's going down for real.
Whatever will they do?
It's going down for real. So come back next week. We will be talking about the final section of this book and all the good things that are going to happen there. So we'll see you
Yeah.
then.
See you then.